So exciting to have. Dana will step in on the Health Subcommittee. I know you're going to be great, so welcome, Delegate Jones. A couple of just reminders about voting. We'll have the subcommittee chairs explain the bills. After that, we'll take motions favorable or unfavorable. For any questions, please wait till the motions come and they're seconded for discussion. Please direct them directly to the subcommittee chair. For adoption of amendments, we'll take a voice vote, but for the actual vote on the bill, we'll have a roll call, starting with the vice chair and moving around the shoehorn. At the conclusion, I will announce whether the bill has passed or failed, and I think that's about it on that. So without further ado, Delegate Smith, House Bill 50.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 50 is a bill that prohibits a private education lender or a private education loan collector from initiating a private education loan collection action unless the lender or collector possesses and introduces into evidence specified documents related to the loan. Similarly, a private education loan collector must provide specified documentation in the first collection communication with the student loan borrower and upon request of the borrower. The bill also authorizes a person who suffers damage as a result of a creditor's failure to comply with specified provisions of the bill to bring an action against the creditor. This bill is in the same posture as the bill that passed the committee last year, 21-0. There are no amendments. Mr. Chair, move the bill.
All right, the bill has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, roll call. Oh, yes, sir.
I believe this was a partisan vote on the floor last year. Is that correct? I think this is one of those bills that we had switched on, I believe. I just want to make sure. I know there was one bill on this voting sheet where that was the case.
On the floor last year, the vote was 109 to 30.
I thought so. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Yay. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Yay. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Yay. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Yay. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice. No. Delegate Grice is a nay. Delegate Chetty. Yes. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderton. Yes. Delegate Anderton is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. No. Delegate McComas is a no. Delegate Mangione. No. Delegate Mangione is a nay. Delegate Jones. Yes. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. No. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh. No. Delegate Hinnebaugh is a no. Delegate McCaskill. Yes. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Yes. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Yay. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivey. Delegate Ivey is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes.
Bill passes. Just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, hit your button, but if you're recording your vote, don't touch your button. All right, House Bill 65, Delegate Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this bill is favorable with amendments. The first amendment is technical. The second amendment makes technical changes regarding the roles of the governing body of a county, the Board of Trustees, and the Director of a Public Library System, and applies the bill to the entire state. This amendment does not impact the compilation of any existing collective bargaining units, nor does it impact ongoing collective bargaining negotiations or existing collective bargaining agreements. Move the bill.
Delegate, you want to move the amendment?
Oh, move the amendment. Yeah, Mr. Chair.
All right, the question is on the adoption of the amendments. Is there any discussion on the adoption of amendments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hand. The amendments are adopted. On the bill? Second. All right. Any discussion on the bill? All right, not roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Yes. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a nay. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a nay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a nay. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a nay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon's a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is yay.
Bill passes. House Bill 295.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 295 is a bill that requires constituent institutions of the University System of Maryland and centers to authorize students to withdraw for extenuating circumstances. If a student withdraws for extenuating circumstances, the constituent institution or center must reimburse the student any tuition and fees paid by the student for the semester during which the student withdraws. There are no amendments. Move the bill.
Bill's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. And Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
All right, bill passes. House Bill 366.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 366 is a bill that maintains the Maryland School for the Blind's eligibility for funding under the Public School Construction Program beyond fiscal years 2028 by repealing the termination of their eligibility for those funds. This bill also has no amendments. Move the bill.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. And Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Bill passes. House Bill 368.
Thanks, Chair. This bill is introduced, it expands the statutory preference for using state employees instead of private contractors to perform state functions for all state functions, not just state operating facilities. The exclusive representative for state employees have reported that agencies rarely provide a 60-day notice required by law. This bill, as amended, will require additional notice to the employees and exclusive representatives so that even if the first step is skipped, there'll still be some notice. The First Amendment is technical. The Second Amendment strikes most of the bill and requires an exclusive representative receive a copy of certification from procuring department stating that a service contract is exempt or that the procuring department complied with laws requiring certain cost-benefit analyses and a formal plan for assistance for state employees adversely affected by the service contract. This provision only applies to contracts valued at $10 million or above. Move the amendment.
All right, the amendment's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand. The amendment's passed.
Move the bill, Mr. Chair.
Any discussion on the bill? Right, roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grace. Delegate Grace is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a nay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a nay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Himmelbaugh. Delegate Himmelbaugh is a nay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. And Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Bill passes. House Bill 388.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The bill authorizes the Board of Public Works and State Treasurer to give public notice of a state bond sale through the municipal market monitor, otherwise TM3, or similar service or method as the state treasurer deems appropriate. Move the bill.
Second.
Bill's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grace. Delegate Grace is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinabaugh. Delegate Hinabaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon's a yay. And Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Bill passes. House Bill 397.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill requires the state treasurer to adopt regulations establishing a state investment policy that specifies thresholds for maximum investments in each asset class in which the state treasurer is authorized to invest or reinvest unexpended or surplus money. The bill also repeals a maximum threshold of 10% of total investments for investments the state treasurer makes in the commercial paper asset class, and also the state treasurer must also provide the local government with an opportunity to review, revise, and report any changes in the local investment policies as appropriate. Move the bill.
Second.
All right, bill's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grace. Delegate Grace is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinabaugh. Delegate Hinabaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
All right, bill passes. House Bill 421.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. HB 421 limits investment management fees that the Board of Trustees of the State Retirement and Pension Systems may pay to external asset managers in a given fiscal year to 0.2% of the value of the system's assets of the last day of the preceding fiscal year. Move the bill unfavorably.
Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grace. Delegate Grace is a yay. Delegate Chetty. Delegate Chetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones. Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinabaugh. Delegate Hinabaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a Yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson? Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon? Delegate Solomon's a yay. Delegate Forbes? Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Bill fails. House Bill 428.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 428 is a bill that authorizes the University System of Maryland Board of Regents to award a grant consisting of private donor funds to a student member of the board during the first year of a 2-year term. This is in addition to the tuition waiver the board may already grant in a student member's second year. The grant may not exceed the cost of the tuition and fees incurred by the student member during the first year of a student's term or cause the total amount of financial aid provided by the student to exceed the cost of attendance for the year. There are no amendments. Please move the bill.
Bill's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman? Delegate Corman's a yay. Delegate Smith? Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick? Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges? Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis? Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice? Delegate Grice is a yay. Delegate Shetty? Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson? Delegate Anderson's a yay. Delegate Acevero? Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas? Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione? Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones? Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko? Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh? Delegate Hinnebaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill? Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris? Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson? Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy? Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger? Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson? Delegate Watson's a yay. Delegate Solomon? Delegate Solomon's a yay. Delegate Forbes? Delegate Forbes a yay.
Bill passes. House Bill 541.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. HB 541 is being presented favorable with amendments. This bill requires the Board of Trustees of the State Retirement and Pension System, after receiving proof of death of a former member, to pay any remaining accumulated contributions of a deceased, non-vested former member to the former member's designated beneficiary, or, if there is no beneficiary, to the former member's estate. This bill takes effect July 1st, 2023. The First Amendment is technical, and the Second Amendment alters the definition of earnable income so that lump sum payments that represent retroactive pay increases to one or more classes of employees are not pensionable. This amendment also provides a specific list of positions in state government that automatically vest. This list replaces existing language that describes the positions that qualify for this benefit. Move the amendments.
All right. Any discussion on the amendments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, raise your hand. The amendments pass.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang? Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman? Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith? Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick? Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges? Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis? Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice? Delegate Grice is a yay. Delegate Shetty? Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson? Delegate Anderson's a yay. Delegate Acevero? Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas? Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione? Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Jones? Delegate Jones is a yay. Delegate Stanko? Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh? Delegate Hinnebaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill? Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris? Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson? Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy? Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger? Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson? Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon? Delegate Solomon's a yay. Delegate Forbes? Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Okay, the bill passes. Our last bill is withdrawn, House Bill 383. We'll continue the tradition of Chair McIntosh. We will assume the motion is unfavorable. We'll say going, going, gone. Unless someone stops me, we'll all be recorded in favor of the unfavorable. Going, going, gone. Bill's unfavorable. That concludes our voting session. Let's thank staff for a great first voting session. Our Chief of Staff did great. Delegate Metzger, do you have a question?
Yes, a vote change, if you don't mind.
We
Okay,
don't have vote changes.
I didn't throw my
Yeah.
seatmate under the bus. But
Yeah.
that's okay.
Sorry, let them know.
Okay.
Let them know you tried. All right. That concludes our voting session. We'll now turn to our budget briefings. Jason, I think you're with us. Move forward. Thanks again to our staff for a great first voting session. Jason, personnel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jason Kramer, and I'll be presenting the analysis for the Department of Budget and Management, Office of Personnel Services and Benefits. I'll discuss the ongoing problem of vacant positions in state government, statewide salary actions, the state's health insurance plan, and other budget actions. Starting on page 1, the allowance is $419 million in fiscal 2024. Most of the funds in fiscal 2023 and 24 on this chart will be transferred out of the agency to support state agency salary increases. We'll jump right into it, moving ahead to page 6 and fiscal 2023 deficiencies. The budget includes $249 million in deficiencies for the November 2022 4.5% salary increase. I'll discuss further state salary actions a little bit later in the analysis. However, I will point out that DBM miscalculated the amount needed by $42 million in general funds, so DLS is recommending reducing the deficiency by that amount. Moving to Exhibit 3 on page 7, another deficiency appropriation included in the budget is $9.1 million in general funds for a projected deficit in the Injured Workers Insurance Fund, or IWIF, the state's Workers' Compensation Insurance Trust Fund. Exhibit 3 shows the fund's balance for the past 3 years, including the deficiency appropriation. The fund will reach a balance of about $7.7 million at the end of this fiscal year. It's not out of the ordinary to reach a low balance in this fund before being replenished with the following year's allowance. Exhibit 4 on page 8, I'll next show the agency's budget in fiscal 2024. This shows that the funding in the budget is primarily for statewide personnel actions, and then another portion for the administration of the agency, and then a small amount for the purchase of electric vehicles. Exhibit 5 shows the funding in the fiscal 2024 allowance for those statewide salary actions. There is funding provided for a 2% salary increase and increments in fiscal 2024, totaling more than $300 million. $33 million is provided for the annual salary review, which I'll also discuss later. And then there is also $46 million included for Sliola salary increases and correctional officer bonuses. Exhibit 6 on page 10 shows the budget for the Office of Personnel Service, for OPSB. It totals $28.7 million. Exhibit 6 here shows that personnel makes up about 60% of that amount, with the Workday subscription making up 19% of OPSB spending. Workday is the state's IT platform for human resources. Exhibit 7 on page 11 shows the proposed changes in the fiscal 2024 allowance. Most of these items are discussed elsewhere in this analysis. One item, however, that I will point out is at the very bottom of page 11. The fiscal 2023 allowance last year overestimated the amount of funds necessary for statewide salary actions by about $11.5 million in total funds. DLS is recommending reducing the fiscal 2023 deficiency appropriation by $10.7 million in general funds due to the overestimate. Moving on to the first of 3 issues on page 13. The first issue I'll discuss is the ongoing crisis of high vacancies in state agencies. I'll describe the problem, go over some causes, and provide some potential solutions. Starting here with Exhibit 8, this is a familiar graph showing the vacancies in state government. They hit an all-time high in October of 2022 with nearly 6,500 unfilled executive branch positions, not including higher education. As of January, including higher education and all 3 branches of government, there are more than 9,500 vacant positions. Exhibit 9 on page 14, the rising vacancies are only one part of the story. They coincide with a slow reduction in the number of authorized positions in the executive branch. Exhibit 9 shows that in 2010, there were about 48,500 people employed and carrying out the functions of state government. But by January of 2023, with a vacancy rate of 13.1%, there are less than 42,000 people employed in state government. Exhibit 10 on page 15. The appropriate size for the state government workforce should be decided at an agency and program level, not globally. But I want to use Exhibit 10 to show that the shrinking state workforce is not a recent phenomenon. It's part of a long-term trend in Maryland and also nationally, where public sector jobs never recovered from the reductions of the Great Recession. As this shows, in 2004, there were nearly 9 state employees per 1,000 residents. But by calendar 2022, there were less than 7 employees per 1,000 residents. Population is obviously not a perfect measure of the nature of government's responsibilities. This is just meant as one example. However, there are other indicators that the responsibilities of state government have grown amidst this trend of fewer state employees. Exhibit 11 on page 16. Every session, DLS reports the total number of quantifiable positions it estimates are needed due to enacted legislation. As Exhibit 11 shows, DLS estimated 1,368 additional positions would be needed in the executive branch, excluding higher education, due to new legislation since the 2009 session. Over that same time period, the number of employees working in the executive branch shrunk by more than 6,500. This doesn't account for legislation where DLS couldn't provide an estimate or for other changes to the nature of government responsibilities such as administration initiatives, changing economic conditions, or changing demographics. Next, I'll discuss some of the impacts of these worker shortages. As you've likely heard in many individual agency budget hearings, the impacts of the worker shortage are felt widely. Starting here on page 16 and continuing on to page 17 are just a few examples. At SDAT, assessments are not conducted in a timely manner, which affects both property owners and also causes delays at the Property Tax Appeals Board. At DPSCS, high vacancies among correctional officers lead to large overtime costs, as well as safety concerns for both correctional officers and people in custody. High overtime use is common, as is hindering of implementation of reforms, such as the Blueprint for Maryland's Future at MSDE. The key point to take from all this, I think, is that while the legislature and the administration enact and administer policy, the lack of an adequate workforce sets a limit on what can be done in the state. Next, I'll move on to the causes of this issue and some potential solutions. Last session, the committees asked DBM to study the state salary scale and make recommendations about rebasing it. DBM provided the report, and one of the main conclusions was that the current pay scales are, quote, rigid, outdated, and lower than the current market rate for employees, end quote. On page 18, I've summarized a couple of the recommendations that DBM provided. They include eliminating the salary scale altogether and implementing salary ranges instead, removing steps from the scale so that the raises are larger but less frequent, similar to the federal government's salary scale. One way to improve recruitment and retention is through annual salary reviews. The fiscal 2024 allowance, as I mentioned, includes $33 million for ASRs for more than 5,900 positions, as shown in Exhibit 12. These positions have a vacancy rate of approximately 20%. The largest portion of the ASR goes to nurses across the state, as well as attorneys at the Office of the Public Defender and the Office of the Attorney General. Exhibit 13 on page 21 shows that this ASR is by far the largest in recent memory, and likely the largest ever, both in terms of dollar amount and positions affected. A DLS interim study found that ASRs have a positive impact on vacancy rates. One thing I'd point out is that these ASRs are initiated either by agencies or by collective bargaining units, which request them from DBM. DLS is recommending that DBM develop a proactive ASR policy to determine classifications eligible for ASR awards rather than the current reactive policy. As noted earlier, the allowance includes $389 million for fiscal 2024 salary actions, including the ASR, a 2% COLA increments, as well as a 5% COLA for Saliola employees. Below market compensation is a key driver for the high number of vacancies. As shown in Exhibit 14, general salary increases and increments have totaled more than 26% over 6 fiscal years since 2019, so efforts are being made to improve compensation. I will note, though, that state agency budgets for executive branch agencies, excluding higher education, include funding that assumes a 7.6% vacancy rate in fiscal 2023 and a 7.2% vacancy rate in 2024, despite the current vacancy rates of around 13%. That means that without an improvement in hiring, agencies are overfunded for personnel by about $240 million in fiscal 2023 and $271 million in fiscal 2024. DLS is recommending reducing the fiscal 2023 deficiency appropriation by $25 million in general funds to recognize likely vacancy savings. DLS is also recommending adding language to the fiscal 2024 allowance preventing the transfer of funding for the 2% COLA until January of 2024, and expressing that it's the intent of the legislature that funds are only transferred to agencies that have made progress in hiring. To be clear, all employees would still receive the salary increases, but agencies with high vacancies would be asked to fund the COLA and salary increases from vacancy savings. There are other actions that have been taken to improve recruitment and retention, shown at the bottom of page 23. DBM lifted the hiring freeze in 2021. The administration has eliminated degree preferences from many job announcements, allowing for the attraction of more candidates to jobs, and has allowed faster hiring for high vacancy classifications. In addition to all the vacancies, the budget adds another 576 new positions in fiscal 2023 and 24, as shown in Exhibit 15 on page 24. They're in large part for legislation passed last session, such as the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, which requires the addition of 82 positions at DNR, and 69 new positions at MDE for Chapter 22 of 2022, which established water quality inspection standards. There are also a cumulative 100 new positions at the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the Public Defender that are added in part to reduce caseloads. A problem of this size and breadth will likely require a range of solutions. Exhibit 16 on page 26 provides a non-exhaustive list of choices. I won't go through all of them. All of them have pros and cons, and whatever path is taken, a balance will need to be struck between effectiveness, expense, and equity. Some are straightforward, like raising salaries. However, raising salaries is an expensive ongoing cost. There could be adjustments to the salary scale, as I noted earlier. Salary increases could be automated by tying them to CPI or something similar. As an aside, I would note that what most people call COLAs aren't actually COLAs. They're just general salary increases, as they have no real relation to the cost of living. Other options include improving retirement benefits, either by improving the pension plan or providing supplemental plan matches. On the second page of this chart, on page 27, other options include making changes to the hiring statutes, which many agencies say slow down recruitment, leading to lost candidates. I would note that much of this area of law was written in 1996, so it's more than a quarter century old at this point. Another avenue is to gather more information about employees and the job market. The budget includes a $1 million deficiency in fiscal 2023 for a study on state salaries, which could provide better information about which positions are paid less than market. DLS recommends adding committee narrative, requesting an update on this survey, as well as the state's progress in recruiting and retaining state workers, as well as progress towards the governor's goal of reducing the vacancy rate by half. I'll next move on to issue 2, which begins at the bottom of page 28 and moves on to page 29. Exhibit 17 discusses the state's employee and retiree health insurance account. This exhibit shows that the fiscal 22 closing balance was $57.5 million and is projected to have an $88 million balance at the close of fiscal 2024. Premiums for most members grew in calendar 2023 by 5% for medical plans and 10% for prescription plans for the second straight year, and DBM estimates similar increases again in calendar 24. The state agency share of contributions will grow by 13.7% in the fiscal 2024 allowance. The split of employer to employee costs agreed to by DBM and collective bargaining units is 85-15 or 80-20, depending on the plan. And overall, the goal is for the split to be about 80-20. However, the split in the cost share between the employer and employees in the fiscal 2024 allowance is expected to be 82-18, meaning the state is taking on a larger share than agreed to in order to limit premium increases for employees. The downside of this is that where the state try to catch up to the 80-20 goal, employee premium increases could be very large. And DLS has asked DBM to comment on how it will rebalance the cost share without employee premium shocks. An update on the Medicare Part D transition begins at the top of page 30. I've written here that there hasn't been change in the status of the transition of retirees to Medicare Part D. However, earlier this week, a federal court ruled in favor of the state and said that the state does not have a contractual agreement to provide prescription drug benefits to retirees. DLS has asked DBM to comment on the ongoing legal action. DLS is also recommending annual committee narrative requesting reporting on medical, dental, and prescription drug plan data. On Page 31, during Spending Affordability Committee meetings, in the interim, members expressed an interest in learning more about pre-funding the state's other post-employment benefits, or OPEB liability. The liability is $12.4 billion. Pre-funding the OPEB liability would reduce it considerably due to long-term investment gain assumptions and would help maintain the state's high credit ratings. Any estimate of the cost is highly dependent on how the plan would be designed and the assumptions used. Under generous assumptions, the cost would have been about $611 million in fiscal 2022 compared to the $511 million pay-as-you-go cost. I would note that the benefits of pre-funding only happen if it is done consistently, so it should be considered a long-term commitment if undertaken. And DLS has asked DBM to comment on the possibility of pre-funding OPEB. The final issue is at the bottom of page 31. It's the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. The budget does not include funding for the employee share of the contribution, since the contribution rate, cost share, and startup date were not yet known. Estimates for the cost of this range from between $19 and $62 million annually for the state's share of costs. And just to wrap it all up, just to recap all of our recommended actions on page 32, items 1 and 2 are annual pieces of narrative. Item 3 is committee narrative requesting an update on the salary competitiveness survey and reducing the vacancy rate. Item 4 is language I discussed delaying the processing of the amendment for the 2% COLA. Item 5 is a $42 million reduction in fiscal 23 deficiency due to a budgeting error. Item 6 is a $10.7 million reduction in fiscal 2023 due to an overestimation of fiscal 23 costs. Item 7 is a $25 million reduction in fiscal 2023 due to anticipated savings from vacancy rates. And items 8 through 12 are annual language regarding position creation and abolition and other reporting requirements. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer, for the great analysis, as always. Are there questions for our analyst? I don't see any. Thank you, sir. We'll welcome Secretary Grady back. Great to see you, Madam Secretary. Please come on up with any member of your team you'd like to bring.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Helene Grady, Acting Secretary, Department of Budget and Management. And with me today is Mark Nicole, Deputy Secretary for the Department, and Cindy Kolner, Executive Director of State Personnel Services and Benefits. We are pleased to be here. I want to thank Mr. Kramer for his very thorough analysis. I have learned a lot about the agency through both analyses for today's hearings. We have submitted written response to the DLS recommendations, which hopefully you all have. And with that, I think we're happy to take questions.
Okay, we have your written responses to the questions. Are there any questions from the committee? Delegate Lewis.
Sure. I haven't had a chance to read what you sent. I will. But one of the things I just wanted to highlight, I know one of my colleagues brought this a few weeks back, and I don't know if it would be appropriate to include this in the annual salary review or another vehicle, but just some review of employee job satisfaction. We had this conversation about kind of reviewing, which agencies are doing better on employee morale, and I think part of the conversation, of course, is employee recruitment and retention, but also ensuring that they're having a great experience working for the state of Maryland such that they want to stay, and I think us intentionally highlighting that will be very helpful. So that didn't come up immediately here, but it brought up before, so I just want to know if you guys are thinking about that.
Sure, thanks for that question. And I think you're referring to the hearing on state workforce, which was, I think, just about a month ago, where we covered a lot of the same material and analysis and recommendations. And we did talk a little bit about the concept of potentially instituting some employee engagement survey tools here at State of Maryland. My understanding is we don't have anything currently in place, at least statewide. And I agree with your comment and others that that's definitely something we're interested in exploring. So Cindy Kolner and I in Office of State Procurement under General Services are currently working to procure some HR consulting services to help us with a number of the initiatives that we are looking to deploy in terms of getting at the effort of filling these vacancies to include a salary competitiveness survey, as well as one aspect of the scope of work we're hoping to engage would be to help us design a survey engagement tool. And we do look forward to collaborating with our unions and others, on how we might best design and deploy that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Secretary, good to see you. Very quick question concerning some of the healthcare programs that were discussed in the that were not discussed in the analysis. I believe several years ago, the department was looking at implementing or bidding out a potential switch to Medicare Advantage for both employees and retirees, and I was wondering if that is still something that the department is analyzing and looking at.
So I can start with what I know, and then I'll ask Cindy to fill in any details that I'm not aware of or that I miss. So I do understand, and I've been briefed just in the last couple weeks on analysis and efforts with regard to thinking through Medicare Advantage as a potential option for retiree health. And I think in particular, if I understand, the team at the state have begun to look at that as a potential option in light of the litigation around retiree prescription drug benefits in particular. And so I'm just now getting up to speed on sort of the status of those discussions. In light of this week's court decision, I think we need to think through what the implications of the decision will be on the program here and on, any discussions of alternative options going forward. I do have a meeting scheduled next week with the attorneys involved in the case to help us understand a little bit better the implications and steps forward with regard to retiree health. Do you have anything?
You've covered it all.
I'm not aware of any, I would just add, based on your question, I'm not aware of any efforts to consider like a Medicare Advantage for active employees. It sounded like your question.
I apologize. Obviously, Medicare Advantage is Medicare. It's for it's for
exactly.
retirees, but obviously as part of a incentive package to current employees for when they retire is when the. But thank you. That was great. Appreciate it. Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary, or I guess it's still Acting Secretary.
I'm acting till I'm sworn in, which is scheduled for next week.
I mean, you were nominated so long ago, it's hard to believe, but thank you for being here. I was just looking at one of the written responses to the DLS question. DBM should comment on how it will balance achieving the negotiated cost share with avoiding employee premium shocks. And the response was the administration will pursue a variety of strategies. Is there any examples, either from you or one of your team, about what those strategies might be?
Sure, and I'm actually going to turn to Cindy in a second to have her comment on what some of the strategies might be. I haven't really spent time with her yet on that question, but I just want to clarify in the response. And first I want to say thanks again to Mr. Kramer for the analysis. That's an example of, an issue that wasn't yet on my radar, and the analysis was really helpful for me to understand where we are on that 80-20. And I think the response is specifically saying we'll be exploring options to continue to control costs, first and foremost, separate and apart from the 80-20 split. But I'd welcome Cindy's comments on any of those areas where OPSB is currently looking to opportunity for cost control.
Well, I think we're always working with our consultant to see what's out in the industry to control costs. Certainly, I think an area where we can improve is our wellness program, which was very effective initially when we first rolled it out. And as Jason had mentioned in his review, the savings it's the delayed costs or deferred costs have sort of trailed off in the last couple of years. So I think we would definitely look at a refresh of the wellness programs. And that's really the things that I have on my list specifically right now. I'm sure that Christina and our consultants will have other items to help control costs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, it's good to see you again. And just following up on our conversation about higher ed, I wanted to give a plug. College Park is about to create a new state fellows program, a Maryland Core Fellows program, similar to what they're doing with their federal fellows. So wanted to, hoping to connect you because they're going to have a great group of students who are really interested in interning in state government.
Oh, we would love to have them in our agency and others, so.
I had a sneaking
Appreciate the
suspicion that's what you would say. So looking forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions, so, Madam Secretary, thank you so much. We'll see you in a minute.
Thank you.
I think we have Denise Gilmore with us, who has a member of AFSCME that wants to come testify. And I'll also alert the committee, AFSCME has some really, really great written testimony they've submitted, so I'd ask the committee to look at that. I think Denise also wanted us all to know that Pat Moran is with us today, so duly noted. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay. Was not expecting to sit here by myself, but that's fine. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the members of the committee. My name is Jacqueline Caldwell. I began state service in December 17, 2014. I'm actually working at Springfield Hospital Center. I'm the president of Local 539. I actually came from a nonprofit organization that worked with substance abuse people. And at that facility, we were actually offered a 3% annual increase. I took an $8,000 pay cut to come to this, to join Maryland State Service because I believed in helping people, and I still do. But unfortunately, I was promised regular step increases and cost of living increases. After 8 years, I'm still not at the salary that I was when I left, which means I'm actually behind another 15% of where I would have been had I stayed. Currently, I'm 5 steps behind where I should be. It has been a very big impact on my family. I've got a daughter and 2 grandkids. My grandson's age 11. My granddaughter is age 8, Joshua and Annabella. Some of them, they both come up to Annapolis to testify sometimes or meet with people. So, but it's put a great strain on them. And my biggest concern is when I hit retirement, that I am going to be a burden to my family because I haven't caught up in salary. I'm not alone in this. I represent many people that are struggling to pay our bills and to support our families. I've worked very hard to help other people get pay raises, annual salary reviews. But people that are grade 10 and under, I think we have been sorely overlooked. We've been left off of getting annual salary reviews, and it has created a morale issue for us that I can't begin to even tell you how it feels to feel so undervalued by management and to sit in meetings and hear that we're not valued. It's demoralizing. But I'm not going to leave state service yet because I've got too much to offer. And I'm helping people, even as an office secretary. Every day I help people. During COVID, when others got to telework and stay home, we were actually called in because we were needed so badly at the hospital. And that's by management. But yet, because our classifications are statewide classifications, we're not included in annual salary reviews. I really do hope that some of what I've heard from the higher management at DBM, that they will give us a seat at the table so that we can have a discussion on how to hire staff and how to retain staff, because I can tell you, the state employees have ideas. We know what it's going to take to build the morale in our hospitals, in our correctional facilities, and in every agency in this state, because we are in the trenches every single day. working to keep state services running with fewer and fewer people because pins have been pulled. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for being here. Very much appreciate it. That concludes the budget hearing for Department of Budget and Management personnel. The committee will now move on to the Department of Budget and Management Secretary. An analysis is provided by Mr. Jacob Cash. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Jacob Cash. As you just mentioned, I'll be going over the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary. The fiscal 2024 allowance is $41.4 million, so it's about 10% of what you just witnessed. But this is a 6.8% budget increase. I'll tell you straight away, most of that budget decrease is related to a budgeting technicality where reimbursable funded agencies have salary enhancements in 2023 that are in the personnel division in 2024. So overall, the DBM secretary budget is mostly level funded. So beginning on page 4 is the performance analysis, and that first performance measure is the central collection unit revenues. On page 8, Exhibit 1 shows those revenues versus expenses. As you can see, for every year up until fiscal 2021, revenues were lower than revenues were over expenses, so there was a net profit. But because there was a 7-month pause on collections in fiscal 2021, that did not reach the level of expenses. In 2022, there was a very slight net profit that you can see displayed on Exhibit 2 on page 7. This was about $85,000 in net profit, and it was allowed, or that was possible because they also increased the share of debts that they recovered payments on in fiscal 2022. So activities are ongoing, but there has been an impact because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fund balance was enough to cover that deficit you see in 2021, and they are so far on the right track in the current fiscal year. On that note, in December, the Easy Pass collection system resumed. While the backlog of debts has not been transferred to CCU yet, that is anticipated to occur during the fiscal year, and we're asking CCU to comment on the effect that that would have on agency activities, performance, any additional personnel they might need, and the effect on the current fiscal year revenues. The second performance measure begins on page 8, and that would be the state vehicle fleet purchases related to the zero emission vehicle goal of 25% purchases. As you can see with Exhibit 3 on page 9, the number of purchases for zero emission vehicles has increased since this goal was implemented in fiscal 2020. In fiscal 2021, they made the goal, and in fiscal 2022, they also made the goal. However, this goal only looks at the number of vehicle purchases for which there is a zero emission equivalent. So in reality, in fiscal 2021, if you look at the number of non-ZEV purchases, which there was not an option, it's actually below the goal. So we still could be doing more to electrify the state fleet, but those efforts are ongoing, and we're expecting vehicle purchases to flatline at around the same rate they are now. Exhibit 4 on page 10 displays the overview of agency spending based on the administrative unit. CCU makes up half of the budget for the Office of the Secretary, and that is special funded through those collections that I mentioned previously. Exhibit 5 on page 11 shows the spending by use. And over half of the spending is for regular personnel. This is an administrative unit, so it's slightly less than in other agencies like DPSCS or hospitals where personnel makes up a larger share of costs. $8 million is going towards IT support and systems maintenance, and that includes the system modernization for CCU and the enterprise budget system maintenance and operations for the Office of Budget Analysis. Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the breakdown of the spending change. There's a $3 million decrease, but there are some items that have an increase. Regular earnings increase because of the rebasing of salaries, as well as steps added for budget analysts. Also on that page 12, there's about $200,000 increasing for the cost of shared services. On page 13, continuing in that table, there is a reduction in contractual IT positions. This is related to that CCU systems modernization, and that reduces over $500,000 from the budget. There's also a rebasing of the turnover for contractual positions that contributed to that decrease. And finally, the item that is driving the overall budget decrease is general funds that were budgeted in 2023 that were not continued in 2024 for reimbursable fund salary enhancements. In the personnel data section on that same page, I'll point out that there are 25 vacancies, which is 10 percentage points higher of a vacancy rate than they are budgeted. They're budgeted at 3.7, and their current vacancies are at 13.2. In total, that would, if those positions are not filled during the fiscal year, they would expect to have salary savings in excess of $1 million. There's also 2 new positions added in the 2024 allowance. Both of these are related to an increased workload. First is a budget analyst level 3 in the Office of Capital Budgeting, and a new deputy director of finance. Page 15 begins the issue discussion, and this first issue is regarding the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So as you are aware, DBM is the budget control agency for the state, and they have a responsibility of shepherding all of the funds that are allowed for the state. Exhibit 7 displays the total results from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act so far. And this highlights specifically the discrepancy between grants and expenditures. So there's a tiny, tiny little sliver that is expanded out into that bar. Less than 0.1% of formula grants have been expended, whereas there have been over $8.6 billion in formula grants allowed. States also competitively have applied for grants. There are 19 grants that are still pending, 7 grants that have been denied, and 2 grants that have been approved. So I'd like to talk just a second about the role that DBM has in guiding these federal dollars. They have the responsibility of working with other executive branch agencies to ensure that the budget is balanced and is also in line with the requirements for these funds. DBM has developed some workflow procedures and systems of data management to gather that information from state agencies, to analyze it on a regular basis for statutory and managerial purposes, and also to provide insight for a variety of stakeholders, including the agencies, but as well as yourself, the federal government, and private individuals. They have identified 3 keys to success in monitoring the COVID-19 stimulus spending. The first is that each agency should have a dedicated project team for administering the program, including a team captain who is the point person for the project. They also have recommended that information be as visible as possible, and that processes be as transparent as possible, so that open dialogue is possible from all angles, and that recommending corrective actions can come from any stakeholder who is bearing witness to what's going on. Finally, DBM identified that agencies should be coached on subrecipient monitoring. So if they're providing grants further down the line, they should be coached on how to do that and how to collect the data so that DBM has less of a burden and that there's less of an administrative lag. They have developed a professional development training curriculum as well, which includes, for example, a webinar where over 100 state financial and grant managers registered and received some continuing education credits. They also provide technical assistance on a requested manner. This would include webinars, coming to office hours, developing templates and checklists for agencies, and doing some of that data collection and analysis for them. Regarding this issue of monitoring federal spending, DLS does see some issues with competitive grants. So there are a lot of competitive grants that are available for the state, but we're not necessarily aware of all the matching requirements for these grants. Many grants you can apply for, but if there's not equal amounts in the state budget, we can't use that program. Because of this discrepancy in the information available, DLS is recommending that budget bill language be included that states intent that DBM works with state agencies to aggressively pursue federal funding opportunities, as well as requiring a notification at least 10 days prior to submitting a grant application that has a state matching requirement. Additionally, some of this information, or most of this information, was grabbed from reports submitted by DBM. Fiscal 2023 budget bill language restricted $250,000 in general funds pending the submission of these reports. The first was received in December, and the second was received in February. Because of the timing, that February report is not included in this analysis, but the information appears to be accurate, is very well produced, and we recommend releasing those funds at the conclusion of the budget hearings. Moving on to the second issue. This issue is regarding the audit compliance unit. If you remember from last year, this unit previously was only consisting of one executive director. However, now it has been expanded to include 3 senior program managers, 2 program analysts, 4 administrators, and an administrative officer, as well as 1.5 contractual PINs. The overall budget allowance for regular PINs is $1.65 million in this unit, but 4 of those positions are vacant, totaling over $300,000, which would be about a quarter of this unit's fiscal 2023 budget. This audit compliance unit is important for state government because of some of the issues we've had with audits. Exhibit 8 on page 18 displays the share of audit findings that have been repeated from the previous audit. In 2022, we did see that rate go down, and OLA has commented on that improvement. But they are still higher than the lowest rate in 2013, and it had been a steady increase up until this past fiscal year. Regarding recommended actions, they begin on page 19 and continue on to page 30, but I do not want to bore you by going through all of them in detail. There is a summary of all of them on page 3, but the first would be, the first 10, the first 11 actually are annual reports that we ask for every year. And the last one, recommended action number 12, is what I had just mentioned after that issue, which is the intent language and requirement of notification for competitive grant applications with a state commitment. This also would include quarterly reports summarizing all competitive grant applications. With that, there is an update that summarizes some of the COVID relief spending and some of the activities DBM has done to monitor them, track their performance, and report to the federal government. But that's there for your perusal. I don't want to bore you too much with those details. And DBM has been doing in my opinion, a fairly good job at monitoring that. Most of those outcomes are being tracked, being reported on, and we're seeing improvements. With that, though, my presentation is concluded, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cash. Are there any questions from members of the Appropriations Committee for Mr. Cash on the analysis? Thank you very much, Mr. Cash, for being here. This afternoon, we have Secretary Helene Grady. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for presenting.
Good afternoon again. Helene Grady, Acting Secretary, Department of Budget and Management, and Mark Nicole, Deputy Secretary. Again, we appreciate the analysis from Mr. Cash, very thorough and comprehensive, and have submitted written responses to DLS's recommendations, and we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Grady. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Secretary Grady? Thank you very much. That ends the budget hearing for the Maryland Department of Budget and Management for Secretary's Office. And on behalf of Chairman Barnes of the House Appropriations Committee, thank you very much. That concludes today's budget hearing. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. All right. Guys did a good job with their response.